literally, there are folks in the AIM research that say, look, information governance is not part of our business strategy. It's an afterthought. It's a cost center. There's no leadership or alignment or agreement on objectives. It's just, we don't collaborate much. It's largely a focus on risk management. And that's the gap that I'm talking about in terms of are developing a culture, whether we intended to or not, that really is one that does not foster a great deal of innovation as an everyday thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or so that, to me, as a leader, as a C-suite leader, that should concern me.
I'm joined again today by Kevin Craine, writer, producer, influencer, and podcast host of AIM on Air, the digital transformation podcast, and Everyday MBA. We've read a lot lately about digital transformation and perhaps a lack of obvious alignment with strategies for organizations. Maybe you could talk to me a little bit about how the information management practitioners are struggling to get a seat at the table to build that strategy.
All right. Well, yes, over the last couple of years, for me, in my interviews with real world practitioners for my podcast and in research, and now most recently uncovered in the most recent AIM Industry Watch report, there has been a growing or a latent gap between information management practitioners and their acumen or strategies and business strategies, or if you will, C-suite strategies. Time and time again, practitioners tell me that they struggle to get a seat at the table. They struggle to get the resources that they need to truly innovate. This was something that I was hearing sort of casually in my interviews with practitioners for at least a couple of years now, that was worrisome to me as an ex-user myself. And then most recently, earlier this year, AIM did a rather comprehensive research study focused on just practitioners in the industry. It's the research is present, as I mentioned, in the 2021 Information Watch report, where this gap was really uncovered in a very bold way. 62% of the folks surveyed said specifically that it isn't the technology that's a challenge, necessarily their top challenge. It's the strategy development and making the case that is inhibiting their digital transformation efforts. The report literally asks, how would you rate your organization when it comes to aligning business strategy with information management strategy? And the results were shocking to me. I mean, 35% rated their organization a D and needs improvement. 11% said their performance was poor. So 46% say that the alignment between their information management, their information governance strategies, and their business strategy is either poor or needs improvement. And I think that should be a wake-up call for all of us.
I'm not shocked being in the industry. The symptoms, in my opinion, have all been there. For example, you see more and more data breaches. You see more difficulty in compliance, obviously operational inefficiencies with people working at home and not having the right information at the right time. But maybe we could talk about the go forward implications. Like, what's at risk now because of the strategic gap?
The implication is that despite our good intentions, many organizations, the culture is one that actually inhibits innovation and is actually a roadblock to digital transformation. Listen, often the solutions and process improvements are known by practitioners that I speak to. They understand the technologies, they understand where it can take them, they understand where they need to go, but those innovations are left unrealized because of this very gap.
It feels like there's a lot of information that's being left behind. Like, for example, new media that's being generated. There's, like, in traditional areas that we work, like pipeline data might not become a record because it might be video and these types of things. Are you seeing lots of examples, or could you give some examples of where this new media is becoming a problem?
Well, this gap is made even more difficult because of the influx, not only of the volume of information. We talk a lot about how much information we have to manage every day, but the different kinds of information. There was an interview I did a couple of years ago and with a practitioner a real world practitioner. She is in a county government in the United States. That her team, an information records management team, they routinely scan and store over 1 million pages of documents every year. And so that's a traditional sort of records management function that we might know well. That's challenging enough, but now they're being asked to save 911 police dispatch calls, audio files, and as well as body cam footage, video files. Now, these are critically important files, but really, for the most part, overlooked in certainly our traditional notions of enterprise content management or information governance. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but the upshot of the interview, or this portion of the interview, was that there really is no strategy in place for these files. I got the sense that there really wasn't a linkage to the C-suite, if you will, or upper management. There was really not an evaluation of maybe the risk, but certainly not the value of this information. So their policy was really just to save everything.
So that ties right into your previous point, which I really like, is you're talking about a lack of innovation as far as the understanding of the data, as far as the use of the data, the governance of the data. There's no innovation there, but on the front of the business, there is new media coming in, and there's web meetings, and there's the other media happening. So there sort of is innovation at the front of a business, but at the back of the business, in order to support it from a governance, compliance, records management, all of those perspectives aren't innovating. It feels ironic to me, and it's weird that it's not obvious that perhaps the C-suite sees that.
Literally, there are folks in the AIM research that say, look, information governance is not part of our business strategy. It's an afterthought. It's a cost center. There's no leadership or alignment or agreement on objectives. It's just, we don't collaborate much. It's largely a focus on risk management. And that's the gap that I'm talking about in terms of our developing a culture, whether we intended to or not, that really is one that does not foster a great deal of innovation as an everyday thing, right? Mm-hmm. Or so that, to me, as a leader, as a C-suite leader, that should concern me and would concern me. And I think that the C-suite leaders should take this research and these sentiments as a wake-up call to address that gap. At the same time, I believe that practitioners could also do a better job at relating what they do to what is important to the C-suite.
I like that you keep bringing it back to strategy, and I'll throw something out. I just read it's not a new article from Harvard Business Review, and they quoted in 2018, if you add up all digital transformation efforts worldwide, there was a $1.3 trillion spent. And that's enterprise search, information governance, that's automation, all of those things, mm-hmm. $1.3 trillion. And they suggested that 900 billion of that was wasted with no result. And their point was, people are putting the cart before the horse. They're starting technology, which I agree with you, the technology works ultimately, but they're starting it without a strategy. And I believe the information management practitioners, people like you and me, can help evolve the strategy. And maybe we need to get better at our storytelling and more standardized in that, in order to tie all of these what seem to be disparate things, like between enterprise search, information governance, file analytics, all of these fit together into this thing that we call digital transformation. But it's, from a strategy perspective, it's not obvious how to tie them together.
Listen, all the technology in the world, all the money that we could spend is really all for naught if we don't have people working together on a vision and a strategy that everyone is on board with and knows what we're doing. And this gap that is clearly resonant among practitioners and then is clearly present in the balance sheets should be a wake-up call to C-suite leaders and information management professionals everywhere. And we need to maybe refocus some of our efforts on this cultural part of making transformation and innovation happen.
Yeah, I like that. And as we bring it back to AIM and the good work that's being done there, I've talked to people like yourself who have been around for a long time, and at the trade shows, talking to people who were past board members and founders from 20 years ago plus, And it was interesting because the conversations were never about, are we using laser disc or are we using this type of tape? The conversations were always about, what is the strategy? How are you making sure that you're compliant? How are you making sure that your users are getting the right pieces of information? So I believe that AIM has always been on the right track with that, and trying to further impress this idea of strategy, I think will help influence.
They have been, and AIM should be commended for looking at those sides, using those, those lights to shine from a different angle. I know some of the work we've done recently with AIM also focuses on the change management aspect of transformation. Once you have a system and a new methodology, a new workflow that you are putting into place, it's imperative that users every day adopt those systems and adopt the practices. And if they don't, then you're still not where you need to be. So once again, change management up and down the line, all the way from the C-suite down to the basement, is a critical path for any digital transformation effort. And I believe we would find that that is also, something that people like Harvard Business Review, Forrester, Gartner, and all the others would reflect in some of their work and perspectives as well.
Yeah, and you bring it to the people, like the people have to be included in the strategic plan. Have they been excluded before? And is there anecdotes or tactics that can actually make sure that they're part of the strategic plan?
I think one thing that I would recommend, and I'm not the first to recommend it, but certainly it is a principle of continuous process improvement, total quality management. And this is the idea of a cross-functional team. We sometimes hear it referred to as a center of excellence. What I'm talking about is a cross-functional team that is including members of users, process owners, certainly IT, executives, compliance, really everyone that has a stake in this process, or representatives from there, with clear executive sponsorship. In fact, it should be a senior C-level leader of this cross-functional team that is put into place to better ensure that the success that we have in some of the capabilities or techniques that we've found to be effective in one area are then propagated across the organization. And this way, organizations reuse their solutions, they reuse the techniques, they reuse the expertise involved, rather than reinventing the wheel every time. But even more important, foster an organizational culture that then encourages cross-functional teaming and innovation and excellence, and really not discourage it.
I love that approach, the idea that this is a plurality of interests, because I get the point that, I mean, it's not my job to do everybody else's job, and it's not everybody else's job to do mine. But unless we work together to build a unified strategy, we will all do the self-serving thing. And I think back to some collaboration that we had with SAP, obviously very, very successful company that we would aspire to be just like them if we
small little company.
Yeah, exactly.
A little startup.
Yeah, for sure. And they're doing fantastic. But when we get into talking about data and information management, they don't really want to talk about it. They're like, that's your problem. We're going to make sure that we're going to give you the right workflow, the right process, and the right button to press once you've gone off and done whatever you need to do to acquire the knowledge to press that button. And we'll make sure that workflow goes perfectly every time. And I look at that and I'm like, but what if it takes me 40 hours to get all that data to press the button? They don't care. It's like, no, we'll make sure that the process happens. And I'm like, what is the impact if we can change that 40 hours down to 4 hours or 4 minutes of research before you then move the work order workflow or the purchase workflow or whatever it is along the line, and they don't want to touch it. But I mean, for some people, that is their digital transformation, saying we're bringing in our ERP or we're bringing in our CRM system, and that's their digital transformation. And it leaves so much data and information that's going to make you more efficient behind. Is that just systemic, or is it, I believe these cross-functional teams should cure that in some sense?
Yeah, I don't know to what degree it's systemic. I would say that I'm all for processes that need to be locked down and repetitive and run. And if I'm a C-suite leader, I want to know that this thing is going. I am enabling you. I'm giving you the staff and the resources to do it. I'm engaged with the measures that measure the process. And if indeed that's something that needs to run and just be good, then I'm in favor of that. What I'm getting at is not just the incremental improvements that maybe we could make in something like that might save some time and money. Those are always great. What I'm looking at or most concerned about is the more expensive side of things. How do we really use information, and how do we govern it in ways that can do things like increase customer experience and help us enter new markets and gain new market share? How do we use our information in ways that really build competitive advantage in 2021 and beyond? Those are the things that I think are not getting done because of this prevalent gap that we're talking about between information governance practitioners and their acumen and their sort of world, and the C-suite and business strategy world, and where the business really needs to go. And my guess is that there is a common gap there that could be addressed to make the organization more innovative and accelerate digital transformation in ways that make a difference.
I really like that, Kevin. It's maybe we could peel back. Let's give a couple of examples. I'll kind of seed one where I was talking to the past privacy commissioner for Ontario, Canada, and she was explaining about how she works with companies to make sure that their security practices actually drive bottom line revenue, and it allows their end users to self-select how much information they're willing to provide, which increases their CRM accuracy. And it builds more trust with an organization, which directly then turns into more repeat business. That's right. A cool one. I think there's all sorts of other better than anecdotal evidence to suggest that having a better understanding of your data, perhaps we could explore maybe a couple others if you have some anecdotes.
No, I think that you're exactly on what I'm talking about. That's a little bit more than taking information and packing it away and making sure it's safe. That's a linkage that I'd like to hear more about as well. Those are the kinds of customer experiences or customer use cases that I always ask about in my interviews on my various podcasts. Almost without doubt, you'll hear me ask the question, all right, can you give us an example of an organization or a use case that is successful in doing these techniques? What did they do? And how can we do it too? Those, I think, are the discussions that we should be having in trade media. Unfortunately, I must say that the majority of feedback that I get from my user interviews are about this sort of, they feel stymied.
I am seeing more and more as more people do more digital transformations, and as we have success with customers, as we engage new customers that then go back and look at our referrals, the biggest thing that they're asking us now isn't, will this work? They do believe it'll work now because there's enough evidence in transformation out there and success stories. What they're asking is, what roadblocks did you get over that you can help me just walk right around? Because we'll probably see them in my organization that you guys had to bowl over as you did it for the first time with other organizations. And I think that's becoming more mature. That's a great question for a customer to ask, is not, can I get the outcome? I believe they can. It is, what crazy things did you encounter during the implementations that we're not going to have to worry about because you know how to get through them? Would you say that that's a better sign of maturity and a better question to ask?
Yeah, I think so. But here's an even better question that I would ask. I like that. Those often can be the technical hurdles, or what are the things the roadblocks that we can avoid. I love all of that, of course. But ultimately, the question I would ask, when I spent 14 years as a middle manager, I was pitched all kinds of technology, and sometimes I would get excited about it. And I would play the role of a change agent, advocating for that up the line. The biggest challenge I had, and it continues to be the biggest challenge that I hear from practitioners today, is answering the question, how can I sell it? How can I sell it internally? I love this idea, Jason. Your technology is great. I see what you've done. I understand about X, Y, Z. But when I hang up the phone or we go back to work after lunch or whatever, I've got to come up with a case for it. And so the question for I think practitioners and suppliers is how well prepared is that advocate of mine, or how well prepared is Kevin Craine to advocate and be a change agent? What are the things that he's going to need to express his excitement and the confidence that this potential solution will work?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Kevin. Like the idea that empowering the champion within the organization, the person that you're connected with, to then sell, when quite often they're not, there may be a technical resource, they might be somebody with a library sciences degree and
Right.
perhaps never sold anything in their life, and they've never been taught
Right.
the emotional side of the buying journey, which is, I think, 90% of the buying decision is made based upon emotion. And how is this going to affect me? How is it going to make me look good? Is it going to make me look bad? Are more important than does the widget do the specific task.
Here's a quote from the AIM research about someone that they had success in bridging this gap. And the quote was, "The hardest lesson I had to learn was that nobody recognized the value of records management unless they understood the value of that information." And that meant working to transition the view from viewing a record as something you just stored and archived and retained to something of value that you could utilize to extend your work processes and your organizational performance. I think you said in your own work with your people, your customers, you found that, what was it? The great majority of information stored today is redundant, obsolete, and trivial. Was it 80%?
We found
Remind me again of that.
up to 80%.
Up to 80%.
Yes.
The fact that organizations just discovered that 80% of their stuff that they're storing is, shouldn't maybe be there. That's just a clear indication of how this gap is manifesting itself every day.
Ultimately, like strategically, how I'd like to position what we do is that we're prerequisite for you to develop your strategy. It's prerequisite to decide how you're going to get into the cloud. It's prerequisite to decide what information are you going to dispose of. It's a full understanding. But quite often we have to align ourselves with people like that Harvard Business Review thing, putting the cart before the horse. They'll come to us and say, well, can you migrate into SharePoint Online? And we're like, well, yes, we can. But did you know that we can do redundant, obsolete, and trivial analysis first, and then show you what you don't have to migrate? Oh, that's great. Give us some of that too. So it is interesting that they're asking the wrong question.
Yeah, any good
I'm
strategy
for that strategy. Yeah.
Any good strategy needs to have a clear understanding first. So any information management strategy, migration strategy, any kind of digital transformation strategy, it just makes sense to understand all the information that you have, where it is, and what it means, whether it's risk or opportunity. I'm suggesting a similar awareness be built between information management practitioners or information governance practitioners and the C-suite. And the question I would ask would be, what are the key performance indicators of your organization? How is XYZ organization, how is its performance measured? Data and its pockets and its use in process is a great constructive something that we can measure. We can see it, we can measure it, we can fix it, we can eliminate it, we can improve it, we can modify it, we can add to it, we can do all kinds of stuff and measure how those changes affect the flow of that data and that process. So it gives us a real nice construct to do real world process improvement with that as our, it's our tool. It's our little trowel to dig the holes where we plant the seeds of innovation and growth.